Real strength after 60 is not defined by miles walked, but by the body's ability to respond to precise signals for renewal. It is a biological conversation that begins with intention. Many individuals dedicated to longevity rely on walking as their primary exercise, believing it is the ultimate safeguard for their joints and health. Yet, they often still face the steady decline of sarcopenia or age-related muscle loss, because walking alone rarely provides the stimulus needed to command muscle growth. This exploration delves into the principles of joint-friendly strength, guided by the work of Joe Dispenza. It provides a new map, showing how specific movements combined with focused awareness can signal the body to rebuild, fundamentally shifting the experience of aging away from fragility and toward vitality. Redefining strength beyond cardio walking is widely prized within longevity circles, and for many valid reasons. It is accessible to most people, requires no special equipment, and provides significant benefits for cardiovascular health, lymphatic circulation, and mental clarity. It is an essential component of a healthy lifestyle, offering daily, low-impact movement that lubricates joints and helps manage the body's stress response. People rightly associate a long, brisk walk with a profound sense of physical and mental well-being. This activity maintains a baseline of health and mobility that is undeniably crucial for aging well. A critical misunderstanding arises, however, when this essential activity is mistaken for a complete or sufficient strength maintenance program. The body is a highly specific adaptation machine. The primary adaptation to walking, especially when performed at a steady pace, is endurance. This activity trains the cardiovascular system to become more efficient at delivering oxygen to working muscles. It does not, however, provide the specific type of signal necessary to counteract sarcopenia. Sarcopenia, the progressive and accelerating loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength, is a hallmark of the aging process that walking alone does not halt. The mechanism of muscle maintenance is distinct from the mechanism of endurance. Skeletal muscle requires a specific signal to maintain or grow, and that signal is high-level mechanical tension. This tension must be sufficient to challenge the muscle fibers beyond their normal comfort zone. When fibers are sufficiently challenged, it creates micro-damage that triggers a cascade of hormonal and cellular responses. This includes the activation of satellite cells for repair and growth, leading to thicker, stronger muscle fibers. Walking being a highly efficient and familiar movement, rarely, if ever, achieves this necessary level of tension, especially as the body fully adapts to the routine. From the perspective of Joe Dispenza, all exercise is, at its core, information. The body is constantly interpreting signals from its external environment and, most importantly, from internal states of mind and intention. Walking sends a coherent signal of efficiency, endurance, and low-level mobility. Resistance exercise, conversely, sends a high-priority signal of demand, necessity, and adaptation. To build or even maintain strength against the tide of sarcopenia, the body must receive a clear, unequivocal, and high-amplitude message that its current capacity is insufficient and that survival requires adaptation in the form of stronger, more capable muscle tissue. This gap becomes visible in an applied scenario. Consider an individual in their late 60s who is disciplined, walks 3 or 4 miles every single day, eats a clean diet, and feels generally well. Yet, this same person finds it progressively harder to lift a heavy suitcase into an overhead bin. They notice a distinct struggle when trying to get up from the floor without using their hands for support. Their joints may feel fine, and their cardiovascular health may be excellent, but their functional power is clearly declining. This person is experiencing the profound gap left by relying solely on walking. Their cardiovascular system is fit, but their muscular system is receiving no signal to remain robust. This limitation is not unique to walking. Even other forms of cardio that feel strenuous, such as steady-state cycling on a stationary bike or using an elliptical machine at a low, consistent resistance, fall into the same trap. These activities are wonderful for challenging the heart and lungs, but often fail to challenge the muscles. The human body is brilliant at adaptation and optimization. It quickly learns to perform these repetitive, low-load movements using the least amount of energy and muscle recruitment possible. This efficiency, while great for endurance, further reduces the stimulus for muscle maintenance or growth. The first and most critical step in reclaiming strength is therefore a mental one. It requires a fundamental shift in how exercise is defined. The goal must move away from simple movement or calorie burning and toward the idea of targeted biological signaling. It means accepting that comfort and efficiency, which are often the goals of a daily walk, are different from the adaptation required for strength. This cognitive shift is essential for any individual seeking true, resilient vitality, not just passive aging. Joe Dispenza's work emphasizes that a significant change in the body must be preceded by a change in the mind. If an individual holds the deep belief that walking is sufficient for all their needs, their body will primarily respond to only that signal. By consciously embracing the need for safe, progressive resistance, the mind prepares the body for a completely new set of instructions. This mental preparation opens the neurological and biological doors to genuine physiological change, moving beyond mere maintenance of the status quo and into the realm of regeneration. Recognizing this gap is not a criticism of walking, but an invitation to supplement it for a more complete and resilient longevity strategy. But if walking is insufficient, how can a person apply the necessary load without damaging the very joints they seek to protect? What part of my routine feels comfortable but lacks real challenge? The joint-friendly paradox, a pervasive fear in the aging population, is that adding load or resistance will inevitably lead to joint pain, inflammation, and degradation. This fear is understandable, as many associate strength with heavy weights and intense, high-impact activities. This apprehension often pushes people toward activities like walking or swimming, which are perceived as universally safe. The paradox, however, is that appropriate, progressive load is not the enemy of joints. In fact, it is their primary source of nourishment, maintenance, and stability. Inactivity and the complete avoidance of load are often the true culprits in joint fragility and decay. The mechanism of joint health is dynamic, not static. Articular cartilage, the smooth, glassy tissue that covers the ends of bones within a joint, has no direct blood supply. It receives all its oxygen and nutrients from the synovial fluid that bathes the joint capsule. This fluid is circulated through a process of compression and release, a pumping action that occurs only when the joint moves through its full range, ideally under some form of load. Walking provides this for the hips and knees, but often in a very limited and repetitive range of motion. Joint-friendly strength exercises, like a full-range bodyweight squat, ensure this nourishing fluid reaches all areas of the cartilage. Furthermore, the structures that support and stabilize the joint, the ligaments that connect bone to bone and the tendons that connect muscle to bone, adapt directly to the stresses placed upon them. This is known as Wolff's Law for bones and Davis's Law for soft tissues. When these connective tissues are progressively and intelligently loaded, they remodel themselves. They become stronger, denser, and more resilient to shear and tensile forces. This increased stability, this active armor, is what protects the joint from sudden, unexpected forces that might otherwise cause a sprain or tear. The muscles surrounding a joint are perhaps the most critical component of this protective system. The quadriceps and hamstrings, for example, act as the primary shock absorbers for the knee. The rotator cuff muscles stabilize the complex shoulder joint. Walking does not build the requisite strength in these muscles to handle significant loads. Joint-friendly strength exercises, such as eccentric-focused bodyweight squats or resistance band exercises, focus explicitly on building this muscular armor. This armor diffuses forces away from the passive structures like cartilage and bone, protecting the joint structure itself from wear and impact. The key to unlocking these benefits, as emphasized in the work of Joe Dispenza, is the quality of the signal. The difference between a damaging, inflammatory force and a strengthening, Adaptive load is often found in intention and control. A sudden, uncontrolled impact, like landing hard from a jump or lifting with poor form, sends a chaotic, high-stress, and potentially damaging signal. A slow, controlled, and mindful movement, even with significant resistance, sends a coherent, manageable signal for adaptation and growth. The mind's focus directs the neurological and, consequently, the biological response. This focus on internal awareness, a cornerstone of Joe Dispenza's philosophy, relates directly to the concept of proprioception. Proprioception is the body's non-visual sense of its position and movement in space. Joint-friendly exercises demand high proprioceptive awareness. The individual must focus their mind entirely on the sensation of the specific muscle contracting and the joint moving smoothly through its path. This heightened mind-muscle connection is a neurological skill. It ensures that the load is applied correctly, maximizing the adaptive signal to the muscle while minimizing compensatory stress on other, more vulnerable structures. An applied scenario illustrates this principle. Imagine a person performing a simple resistance band row to strengthen their upper back and improve posture. They are not simply pulling the band back and forth. They are seated, stable, and focusing their awareness entirely on their scapula, the shoulder blades. They feel the muscles in their upper back engage to initiate the movement. They control the pull, pause at the peak contraction, and then, most importantly, slowly release the tension, controlling the eccentric phase. This mindful application of load strengthens the muscles supporting the shoulder girdle, improving posture and reducing impingement risk. This makes the joint more resilient than it was before. The benefits of load are, of course, entirely conditional on form and progression. This is where the fear of load originates, and it is a valid concern if it is ignored. Applying too much weight, moving too quickly, or using poor biomechanics will damage joints, reinforcing the fear. The antidote is not the avoidance of all load, but the patient mastery of movement. This requires humility, starting with very light resistance or just body weight. It means prioritizing perfect, controlled form over the desire for intensity, ensuring the signal sent is one of growth, not one of trauma. This perspective fundamentally reframes the concept of joint health. It ceases to be a fragile, finite resource that must be preserved by avoidance and caution. Instead, joint health becomes a dynamic and robust state that must be earned and maintained through intelligent, mindful, and progressive loading. This approach builds a resilient, self-protecting system capable of handling the demands of an active life. Knowing that mindful load is necessary, how does this signal actually translate from a mental intention into new muscle tissue? Do I fear applying load more than I fear becoming weak? Signaling the genome for muscle the creation and maintenance of strength, especially later in life, is more than a simple mechanical process of tearing and repairing muscle fibers. It is a profound act of biological communication. The body, in its wisdom, must be thoroughly convinced that the demand for greater strength is real, urgent, and that the resources for growth are available. This is where the limitations of conventional, dissociated exercise become apparent. Simply going through the motions while the mind is elsewhere provides a weak and muddled signal, one that the body may choose to ignore, especially as the baseline anabolic drive declines with age. The work of Joe Dispenza argues powerfully that individuals are not permanently bound by their genetic inheritance or the perceived inevitabilities of aging. Through focused intention, elevated emotion, and new experiences, a person can create new signals that influence gene expression. This is the domain of epigenetics. The genes themselves, the DNA blueprint, do not change. However, the activity of those genes, which ones are read, transcribed, and turned on, and which ones are silenced, can be profoundly altered by the environment. Dispenza posits that the most powerful part of that environment is the internal one created by thought and emotion. The biological mechanism of muscle growth provides a clear example. When a muscle is placed under significant load, it triggers specific signaling pathways within the cell. One of the most critical is the mTOR pathway, which is essential for initiating muscle protein synthesis. This is the on switch for growth. However, the body's willingness to flip this switch is governed by the broader systemic environment. If the body is in a state of high stress, dominated by the catabolic breakdown hormone cortisol, the signal for growth can be blunted. The body, receiving signals of danger or scarcity, will prioritize immediate survival over the resource-intensive, long-term project of building new muscle. This is why Joe Dispenza emphasizes the critical importance of brain and heart coherence. When a mind is focused, calm, and present, and the emotional state is elevated, with feelings like gratitude, joy, or determination, the body's chemistry changes. It shifts from a sympathetic, fight or flight state to a parasympathetic, rest, digest, and repair state. This coherent internal state creates an optimized biological environment for repair and growth. Exercising from this coherent state sends a much clearer, stronger, and more compelling epigenetic signal to the muscle cells. The practical application of this, representing a midpoint payoff in understanding, is to precede and infuse strength training with clear, focused intention. Instead of seeing a set of bodyweight squats as a chore to be endured, the individual can spend a few moments in a coherent state. They can mentally rehearse the movement, visualizing the perfect form and feeling the outcome of renewed strength and stability. They're not just lifting their body weight, they're instructing their genes to build a new, stronger body. The exercise becomes the physical instruction that validates and executes the mental command. This can be seen in an applied scenario. A man in his 70s prepares to perform isometric holds, a joint-friendly way to build tension. He closes his eyes, breathes deeply to calm his nervous system, and generates a genuine feeling of gratitude for his body's potential. He visualizes the neural pathways firing cleanly and the muscle fibers recruiting in unison. He then begins the hold, maintaining that mental focus entirely on the sensation of powerful, stable, and unwavering contraction. The signal he sends is not one of struggle or strain, but of deliberate, focused command. This coherence amplifies the physiological response to the exercise. The counterexample is the person who performs the same exercises while harboring deep-seated, limiting beliefs. They may think, I'm too old for this, I'm bound to get frail, or this probably will not work. This internal state of fear, doubt, and limitation creates a conflicting, incoherent signal. The exercise provides a mechanical stimulus for growth, but the dominant emotional and mental environment signals decay and defeat. The body, confused by these mixed messages, fails to mount a robust adaptive response. The epigenetic on switch remains stubbornly off. This framework places the mind as the primary driver and active participant in strength creation, not as a passive observer. It is the X factor that elevates joint-friendly exercise from simple physics to profound biological instruction. The exercise provides the challenge, but the mind provides the context and the command for how the body should respond to that challenge. This synergy is what unlocks potential that mechanical movement alone cannot. This perspective suggests that the internal story a person tells about their aging body may be the most significant factor in their physical outcome. What future do I truly believe is possible for my body? Neuroplasticity in movement strength is not just a property of the muscle. It is, fundamentally, a function of the nervous system. A strong muscle is one that the brain can communicate with and recruit effectively. A significant portion of the weakness commonly associated with aging is not just the loss of muscle tissue, sarcopenia, but also a decline in neural drive. The connections between the brain and the muscle fibers can weaken through disuse, becoming rusty. This makes it harder for the individual to access the strength that may already exist, creating a gap between potential and performance. The mechanism for this is motor unit recruitment. Muscles are composed of motor units, which consist of a single motor neuron and all the individual muscle fibers it innervates. To perform a powerful contraction, like standing up from a low chair, the brain must send a strong, synchronized signal down the spinal cord. This signal must recruit a large number of these motor units simultaneously. As people age and become less active, especially in challenging ways, they often lose the ability to do this. They become neurally inefficient, and the highest threshold motor units, those controlling the strongest fibers, can go dormant. This is another area where walking falls short as a strength tool. Walking is a low-threshold, highly automated activity. It requires minimal conscious thought and minimal motor unit recruitment. Because it is so neurologically familiar, it does not challenge the brain to forge new connections or maintain the high-threshold pathways needed for powerful, controlled movements. This is why joint-friendly strength exercises, which demand high levels of control, balance, and tension, are fundamentally exercises for the brain as much as they are for the muscles. Joe Dispenza's work is centered on the concept of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's inherent ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. The operating principle is often summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together. When a person practices a new or mindful movement, they're repeatedly firing a specific neural circuit. This repetition, especially when combined with focused attention, strengthens that pathway. The brain literally rebuilds and reinforces the connection to the muscle, improving its ability to send a clear signal. This process of firing and wiring can be dramatically accelerated through the practice of mental rehearsal, a key concept in Dispenza's teachings. By vividly imagining the movement, feeling the muscle contract, seeing the joint move smoothly through its full range, the individual fires the very same neurons that are used during the physical act itself. This mental practice primes the neural pathways, effectively clearing the rust away. This makes the subsequent physical movement stronger, more coordinated, and more effective at signaling the muscle for growth. An applied scenario illustrates this clearly. An individual finds it difficult to activate their gluteal muscles during a bodyweight squat. They feel the movement mostly in their quadriceps, and their knees tend to cave inward, a common and risky pattern. They spend time sitting, eyes closed, visualizing the perfect squat. They mentally rehearse the feeling of pushing their knees out and squeezing their glutes powerfully at the top. When they stand up to physically perform the squat again, the connection is clearer. The brain, having been retrained by the rehearsal, can now find and activate the correct muscles more effectively. There is a significant limitation to this process: the pain signal. The nervous system's primary job is protection. If a movement, or even a specific range of motion, is associated with past pain, the brain will actively inhibit muscle recruitment in that area. This is known as neuromuscular inhibition. In this case, simply trying to push through the weakness reinforces the brain's danger signal. The movement must be modified to be completely pain-free, perhaps by reducing the range of motion or using assistance. This allows the brain to learn to associate the movement with safety, permitting the neural pathways to be rebuilt. Joint-friendly exercises like Tai Chi or slow-motion isometric holds are powerful tools for this neurological retraining. They are deliberate, balanced, and require immense concentration. They force the brain to disconnect from its predictive autopilot, which relies on old, inefficient patterns. They demand that the mind become fully present, engaging in the active process of rebuilding control, balance, and stability. This renewed neural drive is often what makes a person feel stronger and more confident, often long before significant muscle mass has been built. Strength training, viewed through this lens, is a process of retraining the brain to remember its inherent connection to the body. It is an act of reclaiming neurological territory that had been ceded to aging and disuse. The muscle is simply the physical expression of the brain's renewed command and control. Once these principles are understood, how does an individual weave them together into a new, coherent identity of strength? When I move, is my mind present or is it somewhere else?